So all this time we've been focused on mechanical things, making sure you have a nice mechanical pencil that you won't have to get up and sharpen in the middle of working, making sure you have a binder that's organized, making sure you have space so you can get your work done, making sure you have a calculator with you that you know how to use. But what we haven't discussed is the actual doing of the math homework. The actual important part where you answer the questions and hopefully you get them right. So this video will be about dealing with that situation where you sit down and you have everything open and ready to go, and you look at the first question and you don't know what to do. Before we get into this, the way you avoid this really starts way before you sit down to do the homework. So as we discussed before, you got this homework in class. You sat through a lesson and then the teacher was explaining basically exactly how to do this homework. And as they were explaining, you were copying everything, taking notes. And ideally, that lesson ended before the end of the period, so you had some time in class to start answering the questions straight away while it was still fresh in your mind. But sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't. Now let's say this class was Tuesday, and you don't have math again until Thursday. I mean, that's a pretty common situation. You should do that homework, or at least half of that homework that same night, Tuesday night. Don't wait until Wednesday night to do it. Why? Because you had all of Tuesday night and then all the stuff you learned on Wednesday, so that it's harder to remember what the teacher was talking about on Tuesday. So it will be harder to start the homework the longer you let it sit after the lesson. Now, I realize this is a real challenge because all it will take is one extracurricular activity or getting invited to one friend's house, and then you're one day behind. So you may have to do some serious rearranging of your schedule so that you can get this homework in. And if you're the kind of person that thinks that math is hard, then you have to start grabbing at these little opportunities that'll make things, 4 or 5% easier for yourself. Anyways, you sat down. Everything is open. It's in front of you. Almost all math textbooks are written the same way. They're in chapters, and the chapters are in sections. So chapter 3 has 3.1 and 3.2. You get it. And each session starts with a lesson. Yes, the textbook actually explains the thing you're learning, although most people never even realize it because they wait for the teacher to explain it, and they just open to the part that starts at question 1. So you could actually, read a different person's instructions, give yourself a head start. I mean, say today you did 3.3, and you got the homework and you finished the homework. 3.4 is going to be next. You could actually read ahead in the textbook, read the lesson, so you know what it's about. And then when the teacher teaches it tomorrow, you've already seen it. And so it's more familiar. And you have a better chance of understanding it the second time round when everyone else in the class is hearing it for the first. That actually happens a lot in university where they tell you what section they're going to be doing every single day. They sometimes start the class on the assumption that you've already read what's in the book, which means in those situations you can actually be like doubly behind. But high school is easier than that in the sense that they almost always let you wait until a human explains it. Anyway, at the end of the explanation, usually there is a box. And in the box is a sort of summary of the key ideas of that section. So if they taught you a new formula, it's in the box. Or if they introduce some important terms, they're in the box. So before you start the homework, find the box. Read what's in the box. You should say to yourself, oh yeah, we just talked about that in class. I remember. But that also means if part of the topic is using a new formula, you don't have to have it memorized. You can just look at the box and copy it out again whenever you want it. It's very, very important. The next thing to know is that the homework questions are arranged in level of difficulty. The sections are often labeled A, B, and C. Those translate to easy, medium, hard. Easy just tests whether you were in class and awake. They work through problems that are exactly what you've already been shown, just different numbers. And if you're already not sure what to do, you can look back to your notes from the class, flip back a couple pages in the textbook, and you will see sample questions that model exactly what you're supposed to be doing right there. No variation, just exactly step by step. Now, these are great for building confidence to say, yeah, I got this. So you do want to take them seriously. Do you know what you have to write? Are you putting things down on the page in a neat and organized way? Are you showing your work? If you're not writing down steps, just kind of, tapping a few buttons on your calculator and writing just the answer down, I mean, that's okay. And you may be right, but you might also be making the next set of questions harder for yourself. And please, I mean, definitely don't skip any of the questions, especially the easy ones. Math is kind of like a sport for your brain. So it's kind of like going running without stretching first. It's not ideal. You want to have a little bit of time at the start where you get your brain back into the space of doing math. And when you're warmed up, you can actually answer questions that you couldn't answer if you just kind of opened straight away to the middle of the road ones. Now, B part questions, those are the medium ones. And that usually means that you have to take what you did in the A part questions and add in something else. And that something else is usually something you learned earlier, maybe one class before, maybe one chapter before, maybe last year. But that's how they increase the difficulty within a section, by layering old stuff on top of the new stuff. And that's sort of how it has to be. We just taught you the brand new thing. It's the newest and the hardest thing you know. If we want you to learn a newer, harder thing, that has to wait for next class. So in the same homework assignment, the place they look to add difficulty is older stuff you already know, or at least that they assume you already know. That's where the snowballing in math comes in, where if you miss or forget a section, you can't get very far into the next section before it comes back to haunt you. And if you did the questions for the A part, then you're kind of in a rhythm or a zone. You have a feeling for, okay, first I do this, and then I do this, and then the calculator, and so on. And these things wouldn't necessarily occur to you if you just looked at the harder questions first. If you thought the easy ones looked too easy and, skipped past them to the middle of the assignment. Now, usually towards the end of the B section, they switch to word problems. Now, word problems are same method, but they're harder because instead of giving you the question as math symbols, they're giving it to you in English. So you have to translate English to math. And sometimes that's easy. The words going at a speed of 30 kilometers per hour, speed equals 30, fine. But other times English is more roundabout. A really common one is about questions about something like, say, a baseball flying through the air and asking you when it hits the ground. Well, you know what the ground is. You know what hitting the ground is. You've thrown baseballs. This is all common sense. But you're not used to thinking about baseballs in math terms. So really, on the ground means has a height of 0 meters. That was hidden in the English. That 0 wasn't there. So that means going through the question, finding the variable it's standing in for height, taking it out and putting 0 in instead. And lots of people find that very confusing. It takes a while to get the hang of it. I don't blame them. One last thing I will say, and you will notice if you're doing all your homework on a regular basis, that the difficulty inches up very slowly, question by question, in a very particular way. Each question is usually only just a hair more difficult than the last one. They're almost exactly the same. So for example, in one question, you may see a bunch of examples, and they all have, in a certain place, plus signs. And in question 2, very similar, but in that same place, they all have minus signs instead. And maybe in question 3, some of them are pluses and some of them are minuses. But if you can sort of notice those patterns, if you can put into words what it is that's making question 3 different from question 2, you're at least halfway to knowing how to solve question 3. Now, the way they make harder, longer questions is particular. Usually when they add on steps, they add steps by adding them on in the front. So if I learn how to do step A, then in the next question, I will have to do step B followed by step A. And then in the next question, I start with step C followed by step B and then step A. So the question that starts as something I don't know how to do eventually turns into something I do know how to do. Hope that makes sense. What that means is almost all math questions actually get easier to do the more steps you get into them. So that's often a sign you're on the right track. And if you get a couple of steps in and say, I've seen this before. Well, we hope it's actually, I've seen this before and I know what to do. I mean, that's perfect. That's right where you want to be. And you'll know you're really doing enough homework when you get into the question and you get to, I've seen this before. I know what to do. Do I have to do this again? And that's a really good sign. It means you're doing enough work to get the idea of what's going on. And yes, you have to do it again. And you'll be glad you did it. Oh, sorry. I almost forgot. High school math textbooks, they have answers in the back. We didn't trust you with the answers in elementary school, but that's changed. We go through math very quickly in high school. In general, one section of the textbook, almost every single class, unless like there's a test or something. So you need to have a little extra guidance when you're working at home all by yourself. So what you need to do is find a bookmark or a card or a sticky note, physically insert something into the textbook where the answer page is, and you want to check every single answer. If it's an easy question like that has parts A, B, C, D, E, and they're quick, I mean, you can do all 4 or 5 and then check all the answers. But the idea is you need to know whether or not you're on the right track then and there. You do not have time to wait until the next math class to know whether or not there's a problem, because by the time you get to the next math class, they're already starting the next lesson. It's too late. So at that point, if you're having trouble, you're getting the answers don't match what's in the back of the book, you're looking at your notes, you're looking at the textbook or on this channel to see if there's one of the steps that you're doing incorrectly or forgetting. Now that you sort of have a better picture of how homework is supposed to go, you'll find it easier to get started. Well, don't just sit there. I mean, go do some math homework.